When We See Us, exhibition at Beaux-arts until August 2025. When We See Us, a century of black figuration in painting is an exhibition featuring about 150 works of art by 120 intergenerational artists over a 100-year period. This exhibition, the first of its kind and scale, celebrates global black subjectivities and the multiplicity of the black experience on the continent and in the diaspora, while addressing often overlooked yet familiar themes: the everyday, joy and revelry, repose, sensuality, spirituality, as well as triumph and emancipation. This wide-ranging presentation of figurative painting takes us on a journey through several black geographies. We explore innovative territories. When We See Us promises a colourful, soothing and open horizon. The approach of the curators, Koyokuo and Tandazani Laklama, is a part of a profound sharing of joy, light and gentleness highlighted in Beaux-arts' dedicated spaces. The When We See Us podcast, Dialogues and Subjectivities, invites you to discover this exceptional exhibition, which offers a new artistic perspective. Subversion is subtly present, as evidenced by our meeting with curator Koyukuo and co-curator Tandazani Laklama, who guided us through the When We See Us project and the exhibition itself. To meet the curator of the exhibition, you not only have to choose your moments, you have to seize it. If you don't, Koyukuo may escape your notice. Always on the move to capture the zeitgeist, nurture her artistic curiosity, and keep up with her busy schedule as a leading figure in the international art world, Koyukuo is destined to become the first African woman to curate the Biennale of Venice in 2026. Koyukuo is also director and chief curator of the site's Museum of Contemporary Art Africa since 2019. No need to draw a picture of her bulimic agenda. It is dense, just like her career path, which she has shaped in her own way. She left the finances field, much to her mother's dismay, and Europe too. She set out her own path, almost answering a soulful call from the continent.
My mother is still kind of heartbroken that I didn't become a big fat banker. But I'm happy that I left banking early enough. So I studied in Switzerland, banking administration, obviously. I moved to Senegal in the mid-90s, and Senegal is basically, Dakar is basically the place I established myself really professionally. I left Europe almost 30 years ago. I left actually because I wanted to live in a black society. I was a young mother back then. I had a son, and it was very important for me to raise him on the continent. I anticipated that as a young black man, later he would be confronted with his identity, with his background. And I still believe that it is very difficult to convey a culture outside of the culture. I wanted to give that to my son, so I didn't see how I could do it in Europe. In no way. I believe that there is a sense of place and a sense of strength and a sense of power that you gain from, as a young African person growing up somewhere on the continent.
Her approach, which blends art and management, and her closeness to public and artists make it easy to understand why the New York Times described her early on as one of Africa's most eminent curators and art managers. And from 2014 to 2022, she was also named annually as one of the 100 most influential people in the contemporary art world by Art Review. Women are an important part of her career too.
I guess because I was raised and born in a family of mainly women. There are lots of women in my family, very few men actually. Women in my life, starting with my great-grandmother, my grandmother, my mother and her sisters, have been, the people whom I was looking up to. So I was very much socialized with women, by women, around women. Of course, later growing up, I became completely aware of the position of women in various societies and the role of patriarchy. Honestly, I definitely think that women are smarter. That's nothing new. I love women because I get along better with women than with anybody else, basically. I believe that women have progressed quite significantly. The workings of patriarchies are still extremely effective. So, yes, I always stand with women.
This link with women also exists in the way this deeply moving and impressive exhibition has been developed, in tandem with another curator in a spirit of transmission and exchange with Tandazani Dlaklama. Tandazani Dlaklama holds a Master of Art and a Business of Art from both University of Leeds, UK and St. Lawrence University, USA. She has more than 14 years of experience in the art industry, working mainly from South Africa and Zimbabwe and now in Canada. Tandazani was currently curator at the Zeitz Museum of Contemporary Art in Cape Town. Her writing and editorial contribution led to formulate major publications that accompanied these exhibitions.
It's through lots and lots of conversation and debates, and I think everyone brings something different to the table. And we also worked with a larger team, and it was very consultative and collaborative beyond just the two of us.
Our collaboration around this particular show is a typical form of how I work with younger, brilliant curators. A main part of my work is also providing room for others to exist, to shine.
Write your own story, look at yourself, and refuse to be defined by others. That's what this exhibition is all about. The title is inspired by the hit TV series When They See Us, a 2019 American crime drama television miniseries created, co-written and directed by Ava DuVernay for Netflix. It is based on events of the 1989 Central Park jogger case. It explores the lives and families of the 5 Black and Latino males who were falsely accused and prosecuted on charges related to the rape and assault of a white woman in Central Park.
Is my mom here?
It's just us. You and us. Who you were in the park with?
I don't know names. I just got lost.
Where did you see the lady?
One lady.
The female jogger was severely beaten and raped. Every black male who was in the park last night is a suspect. I need all of them.
I like to take titles from cues, either from literature or from film or from, but also twisting stuff. We are convinced that, the dominant narrative of Euro-America is so dominant that a lot is always kind of done or referred to that dominant narrative. And I believe that we really reclaim the space of our imaginary by also reclaiming the space of language in ways that really speaks to ourselves, as opposed to constantly speaking to or from the dominant narrative. So it is really about African curators looking at the Black experience in a very specific medium, painting and figuration. It's also our love letter to painting and love letter to figuration. This is where all that comes from.
Ongoing conversations set the tone for the exhibition, a dialogue between the curators that echoes the links between the works of art on display that the promise of this new artistic abundance at Beaux-arts. In this new perspective, let's take a look at the works of Jacob Lawrence and Gérard Secoto, between Chéri Samba and Barclay L. Hendricks.
We spoke a lot about simultaneity of practice, parallel aesthetics, and we were really interested to see how artists from different generations or different geographies were exploring similar themes or had similar concerns or even similar styles. And it's almost like sometimes as you go around certain sections of the exhibition, you see that there's sometimes a call and response between a younger artist and an older artist, or artists who probably may or may not have met.
Accompanied by the curators in the Beaux-arts galleries, the dialogue between the works of art presented here takes on its full meaning. Tandazani already knows every nook and cranny. Her determined stride takes us past the paintings by Hendricks and Samba.
One of the situations that I always found absolutely unbelievable that no other curator, art historian has ever done so is to bring Chéri Samba and Barclay Hendricks together, because they are two Black artists of more or less the same generation, Barclay Hendricks being a little bit older than Chéri Samba, but definitely the fed and animated and propelled by the same urge to represent Black life in its joyous, in its beautiful, in its defiant, in its exuberant manner, which I found deeply political in ways that you would not necessarily expect to read politics in these kinds of works by Hendricks and Samba. And beyond that, I'm convinced that we didn't find out whether they knew each other or not, kind of in real, but I'm sure that they knew each other's work and were looking at each other's work and somehow even feeding off each other at some point. So we have this work by Hendricks, which title is Anthem of 2015. Obviously one of the late works, considering that Hendricks passed in 2017, which represents a beautiful, amazing Black singer. And we have juxtaposed to it Live dans les sous-sols du Rex by Chéri Samba, a work of 1982, representing a situation in a nightclub, most probably in Paris or Brussels or somewhere in Kinshasa.
This unprecedented and unique artistic discussion continues with an artist like Wangari Maathai. Chicago-based artist turns to history as inspiration for her old paintings, which reinterpret traditional African patriarchal society alongside her own. Maathai's confident hand adds to the beauty of her portraits, creating images that are both personal and expansive. Her works, sundials and sonnets, 2019 oil on canvas offers the pose of a serene, beautiful middle-aged woman reclining on a sofa, gazing at us assuredly with her arms raised behind her head. Maité is in a dialogue with other artists who also reveal to us, as Tandazani explains.
So we're standing in one of the rooms of the repose theme. In this section, there are 3 paintings in conversation that each have reclining figures. So we have Wangari Maathai from Kenya, Henry Taylor from the United States, and Zandile Chabalala from South Africa. And Zandile is also the youngest artist in the show, the oldest being Clementine Hunter, born in 1886. So what I love about this section is that there's a really wonderful intergenerational conversation, with Henry Taylor being the most senior artist, all of these artists painting from very different geographies. But if you look very closely at the painting, all of the figures have a sense of strength and agency and boldness. All over the world for a very long time, artists have painted the reclining figure. And often when others painted the black body was always passive. If you think about colonial photography or the way people described, Africans, there was always passive. But even if you think of Renaissance European art, the woman is always painted passive unless she's an angelic being or a mythical figure. The gaze is always the male gaze, really. But here we see really bold, powerful, sassy women.
Rest and repose and leisure is like a luxury, so to speak, whereas we believe that rest, respite, repose, leisure should be affordable and given to every human being because we need it. So this chapter is one that we were also playing with the idea of parallel aesthetics. We were playing with the idea of parallel aesthetics throughout the exhibition.
Rest is so central to the approach developed by Koyokuo that relaxation is present in the layouts of the premises, which has also been designed with the public in mind.
We partnered with Wolf Architects, a Cape Townian-based firm, Ilse Wolf, to come up with an exhibition design or scenography that really helps people to feel more welcome and feel at home. What they did is they looked at the gestures in the painting. They looked at people embracing, they looked at people dancing, they looked at the different movements in the painting, and they wanted to mimic that within the architecture. That's why you see there's a lot of curvature. Some of the walls kind of hug you or embrace you. There isn't like a militant way that people are supposed to navigate through the space. We want people to meander, to feel like they can sit or stare or even spend like hours and hours in one space. That was quite central to the thinking around the exhibition. But you also notice the colors, the red and the green colors. So the red speaks to the earth, the color of the earth that you find in so many different African countries, the African continent, and green, the flora. But if you also think about it, the red, the green, and the black skin that is celebrated throughout the exhibition makes up the black flag. And this show is about celebrating blackness.
When we see us places the model's rest in a trajectory of openness, reconsideration of stereotypes and sometimes stigmas, as in Beaufort Delaney's painting, Man in African Dress, 1970, Power in Rest or Wonder in Toyin Ojio Dutola, surveying the family seat. And the research carried out to bring all these artists together led to the creators to discover sometimes unknown links between them, which had little influence on them.
Beaufort Delaunay and Lynette Adomboache, for instance, they are, for me, in the same line. There are many, many parallel aesthetics like that we were exploring in the show.
And also to have a Malangatana from Mozambique next to a Jacob Lawrence. We really thought about how, as you look at these artists, as you navigate through the exhibition, you suddenly start to see surprises. But also, if you think about their biographies, there's a room where there's a Ben Nwunu and a Gerard Sekoto. Within our research, we found out that they briefly shared a studio in Paris. Sekoto went into, some people say self-exile, some people say he was exiled. As you start following these artistic lineages and reading up about the different biographies and journeys that they had, some interesting facts come up as well. But if you think of like a big festival like Festac 77, several artists in the exhibition were likely there at the same time or were part of an exhibition at the same time. So Barclay Hendricks, Malangatana, and several others were likely there at the same time.
Understandably, the curator's approach seeks to develop relationships beyond the African continent as well as within it. Pan-Africanism occupies an important place, a vision that is still relevant today. This brings us back to the thought of Kwame Nkrumah, the first president of independent Ghana, a key figure in the Pan-African movement and a controversial figure even at the end of his political career.
There is a new African in the world. That new African is ready to fight his own battle and show that after all, the black man is capable of managing the own affairs.
His legacy is still admired today.
Pan-Africanism will never die because it's an ideal that I believe could be, a way for Africa to liberate itself because we are still working for liberation. I strongly believe in the power of multiples and of plurality. As diverse the continent is, and as multiple the continent is, from my perspective, there is a strong African reality, and I've even put it in singular this time, that connects so many regions of the continent in many ways. First of all, the experience of, expeditions and exploration, the experience of slavery, the experience of colonialism, the experience of independence, the experience of neocolonialism, the experience of the structural adjustment. These are all experiences that so many countries on the continent experience at the same time, but of course with regional, local particularities, but all the while the same experience in many ways. There is the experience of what people call race, a concept that does not exist, but the concept of blackness exists, right? So I strongly believe that also the early founding fathers were very strongly Pan-Africanist. They understood the power of coming together as big entities. And I still believe that this is where we need to go.
In the 1960s, Ghana became a haven for Pan-Africanists from all over the world. The president even welcomed Dr. W.B. Du Bois, artists and intellectuals such as poet Maya Angelou, activist Malcolm X, and essayist Julius Mayfield. Black liberation struggles on both sides of the Atlantic were the crux of the matter at the time, with an ideal of merging energies on the continent and in the diaspora, under a broader radical Pan-African banner. In their approach, the curators evoke the concept of black geographies.
For me, black geographies is a sensitive space. It's an ethereal space as much as it's a real space of every day. But it's also an emotional and spiritual space of your own extension. Black geographies beyond the continent, we are talking black diaspora mainly. These are territories where black cultures and black lives have so much invested and so much, root in those places, as much as to influence them to the level of impacting society and culture.
When I think of black geographies, I think about Black consciousness. And I think a Black geography is wherever there is Black consciousness. And that's complicated, and it's connected to very, different types of entanglements because of our histories. I think when I think of Black consciousness and Black geography, I think of it very broadly. And Blackness means different things in different languages, at different times, in different regions as well. I think of it more as encompassing, and it's linked more to the experience as opposed to a violent way of saying who's in and who's out. It's more about the Black experience or Black consciousness.
When We See Us is an exhibition in which the curators have chosen to place figuration in a longer and deeper temporality than the last 10 years of market frenzy.
It is definitely a sense of bringing a larger scope or a larger timeline of understanding about Black figuration as longer than the last 10, 15 years, where the market particularly, and not just the market, even institutions, art history has been, waking up again to Black practice or practice by Black artists.
It was also important to remind people that Black figuration or some of this discourse around Blackness is what we see today is part of a very important historical continuum. As we were researching, we were thinking about the Harlem Renaissance, the Negritude movement. We've spoken about Pan-Africanism, anti-apartheid movement, the waves of independence in the 60s, Black Lives Matter. And if you think about it, it's a historical continuum, not isolated frenzied moments. And you can think about Black self-expression in the same way.
The exhibition also gives pride of place to female artists. Tandazani Dlaklama guides us through the spaces of beaux-arts and introduces us to a multiplicity of paintresses, challenging the hierarchy of artistic canons and the historiography that still makes them the forgotten ones.
Essentially, it was important for us to think about women artists in the exhibition. That's why on the exhibition catalogue, it was very deliberate that we chose a woman to communicate the exhibition. And of course, with art history everywhere, women's narratives have been omitted, erased, or women's work has been relegated to lesser types of art like crafts and things like that. But if you look at each decade and each era, you see more and more women artists. And I think that's the same for any type of art anywhere around the world. We've had similar challenges. And what I love about When We See Us is that there are moments where we can celebrate certain women heroines from different eras.
In another work, When We See Us reminds us of important African feminist histories. Cyprien Toukoudagba's series, Le Roi part en guerre, 2005, depicts Benin's deeds and celebrates the female soldiers and princesses of Abomi's 12 royal palaces.
For example, we're standing here in the theme of triumph and repose, where we are in front of a work by Cyprien Toukoudagba, who was an artist from Benin. This is a series where he's honoring women warriors from the Dahomey kingdom. It was quite nice. I think around the time of the exhibition, there was a Hollywood movie called The Woman King that came out that really illustrated that narrative. But this was a fierce group of women who defended the kingdom of Dahomey. What Cyprien did throughout his life is that he spent time restoring artworks in temples, in different religious or spiritual spaces in Togo, Nigeria, Benin, different parts of the West Africa. But he was also a priest, and so he, at a very young age, he became a Judong priest. And so there's an element of spirituality to his work as well, but it was very important for him to bring out stories, narratives that he felt were being forgotten around West Africa through painting. And this is just a great example of them. The Dahomey women were present between the 17th and 19th century. I believe they're the only women army that existed in modern history, perhaps in the world, certainly in West Africa. It's a series of different canvases, of 6 different canvases, and each one has a depiction of a woman figure. And in some of the canvases, you see them holding guns or other types of weapons, knives, and they have different names as well. It's a very striking series of work.
Tandazani takes us down the exhibition's meandering path to Michelin Thomas's shimmering, irreverent painting, Never Change Lovers in the Middle of the Night in 2006, featuring a reclining figure on a brightly colored backdrop punctuated with rhinestones. The American artist depicts 2 women wrestling and creates complex works using rhinestones, acrylic and enamel that explore. Her subjects are usually black women, sometimes celebrities and/or homosexuals. They are represented in a way that empowers them, in contrast to the historical genre of Western arts that reduces them to objects. In this way, when we see us inscribes the works in contemporary questionings and makes us reflect on femininity, race, sexuality and gender. Michelin Thomas is in dialogue with Montego Schula's 1959 work Le Choix du Troisième Sexe from Democratic Republic of Congo.
Like many paintings in this section of the exhibition, there's a lot of questioning, and so in this sensuality section you'll see couples, you'll see questions with Monsulo Shula across from Michelin. You'll see a painting where Monsulo Shula from the DRC, the painting is titled Choix du Troisième Sexe, made in 2010. And so there's a lot of questions. And again, I love the fact that there is a multiplicity in the way that different artists from around the world have looked at sexuality, gender, intimacy, but also just some figures on their own, just comfortable in their own skin, their own nudity.
The gaze of my work is unapologetically a black woman's gaze loving other black women. That's the gaze.
The exhibition is thus divided into the sub-themes: everyday, joy, revelry, repose, sensuality, spirituality and triumph, and emancipation. Black joy, which is in fact a very serious, eminently political subject, links the pieces in this figurative anthology.
People say, but I'm not content to survive, because and implicit in that response is a certain kind of denigration of what survival is. That is to say, they reduce survival to mere existence. And that is not survival.
No, it isn't. And certainly not for you.
That's right. Implicit in survival is joy, mobility, and effectiveness. And effectiveness is always relative. I mean, none of us are going to move the earth 1 millimeter from its axis. But if we do what we need to be doing, then we will leave something that continues beyond ourselves, and that is survival.
Audre Lorde, American essayist and poet, librarian, feminist activist, lesbian, involved in the civil rights movement for African Americans, describes the joy in living as one of our most potent weapons, and is the notion that joy and imagination play an integral role in the movement for peace and justice.
I think you can have a show about Black joy without sanitizing history. I think if you look carefully at the paintings and the content, you see that there are political gestures and there are political readings within the paintings. And so I think what we're trying to do, or what this show does, it reminds people that in spite of complicated contexts, in spite of difficult times, in spite of multiple challenges or issues, people still had birthday parties, they went to the club, they went to the movies. Why Black joy is so powerful and why maybe some people can call it a weapon is that it refuses the flattened, reduced, limited reading of Blackness, because Black people sit outside and read just like other people, and Black artists have been expressing themselves in nuanced ways, reclining, sitting, doing whatever, just as every other artist have. I think Black joy is powerful because it refuses reductive reading of Blackness.
When we see us invites the public into boundless dialogue, waving links between canvases, between artists, between eras, between continents to create an infinite mesh. For example, the bridge between the social realist work of South African George Pember's dedication to both watercolor and oil painting resulted in some of the most successful visual documentation and dedication to capturing both traditional and cultural aspects of South African life by any painter of that era in the midst of apartheid, and that of Essery Eredienesi featuring Steve Biko in The Birthday Party. And this painting alone is worth a closer look. Subversion and revolt are solely present.
One of the first paintings that you see in the Joy and Revelry section is a painting by Essery Eredienesi, who's a Nigerian-British artist currently living in the Netherlands. What's quite interesting is that photography is a starting point in a lot of her work. And so she found an image online that depicted Steve Biko at his niece's birthday party. You know, when you look at her work, you also have to think about the history of the camera and Blackness. So the early cameras, the first cameras were not made for Black skin. And so they kind of distorted and flattened Black skin. It's only when the chocolate and furniture companies started complaining that they started correcting how Black skin looked on the camera. And so I think that's probably one of the reasons why the way she paints Black skin is very rich. If you look at it, there's so many textures and tones, but there's still a sense of nostalgia. So it still feels like an old photograph from somewhere. And contrast that to the background. If you look at the background, it's a lot more flat. There's a lot more form, whereas the skin is kind of more sculptural. And then, of course, you see the thing that anchors the painting, or the center of the painting, is the cake. And the cake literally has these thick, like, layers. I think maybe she used her finger or something, or a really thick brush. She just, like, dabs the paint on very thick in a rich way to kind of create a central point. And, of course, she took a historical photograph and used her artistic license, as all artists do, to add some interesting features. Again, pointing to the fact that this show doesn't flatten history or sanitize it. She's added a Malcolm X pin or a badge. She's someone who likes to collect those types of pins. But also these conversations, whether it's through music or politics or certain movements that were probably happening, or this call and response. So someone like Steve Biko, an important political figure, was probably thinking about Malcolm X and vice versa. Steve Biko also is one of the founders around the idea of Black consciousness. Essery also added an Arsenal logo on Steve Biko's cap, just because as someone who grew up in the UK, she's a big football fan. So that's quite a fun intervention into this really important painting.
Steve Biko is portrayed in this painting in a joyful, triumphant manner, surrounded and loved by those closest to him.
20,000 black South Africans came to mourn Steve Biko, the non-violent but militant black radical leader who died mysteriously in police custody.
This pacifist revolutionary died on the 12th of September in 1977 in detention, officially as a result of a hunger strike.
The announcement was greeted internationally with shock and anger.
Leader of the Black consciousness movement, he was tortured by the apartheid regime. But his struggle never ceased to permeate the townships of South Africa and more broadly, the continent. He became the symbol of black resistance to the cruelty of the ruling power. Better to die for an idea that we survive than to live for an idea that we eventually die, said Steve Biko. When we see us, invites us to remember Steve Biko as a friend, a brother, an uncle who loved and was loved. This year, we celebrate a sad anniversary, 5 years since George Floyd's death and the emergence of Black Lives Matter. Black pain is too often highlighted through images of police brutality, violence, discrimination and marginalization without any filter, any care. The recent killing of a young Afro-American, Robert Brooks, in a New York prison was a brutal reminder of the way in which black bodies are shown on screen on a massive scale. Can When We See Us pave the way for reflection on this subject without denying or obliterating the facts? How does the exhibition fit into this context of recurrent exposure to violence?
Our work doesn't come from a corrective place. Our work really comes from a passionate place. And the second layer of our premise is exactly decentering trauma and decentering the usual tropes around the Black experience and around artists from Black geographies, so to speak, that are always expected to address whatever issues that are topical around our existence. So we did a very decided staying away from that, so to speak. I think whoever sees the exhibition and enjoys it and makes them think a little bit about Blackness in the world in ways that really expands their mind, be them Black or not Black, be them African or not non-African. I think that as Africans, as Black people as well, we are thirsty and in need of seeing ourselves in the ways that we experience ourselves on a daily life in many ways, you know? And it's a saying that I took from my dear friend Abderrahmane Sissako, who was introducing one of his most beautiful films many, many years ago, La Vie sur Terre, where he was saying that people are not only, happy and wealthy in the North and unhappy and miserable in the South. The life is messy and multiple everywhere, including Black lives. This is where I will put that.
To add to that, I think, if you look at one of the earliest paintings from the exhibition, Wilfredo Lam, a Cuban artist, he painted a young woman, femme violette, just sitting with her hands crossed. So that was, I think it was in the 1930s. You think of Benenwunu in the 60s. He painted a scene of young women walking or rising up. That was an important statement, and he painted that in Nigeria. But Zeppelito, a younger artist compared to the other two I've just mentioned, painted a scene of two lovebirds in front of a car, a very fancy car. And I believe that was painted while he was in Brazil. So I don't think that every artist in When We See Us was within the context where Black trauma was centralized. And I think that's important, especially if you look closely at the works. If you think of the Aubin family, Antoine Aubin painted a beautiful rural scene. I don't think he was thinking about, how do we depict the black body and why is it always... And I think we should also be careful about the language we use. Sometimes we use it because it's necessary and because it gets the message across. But often when we think about black people, we say black bodies. But it's very rare to hear someone say white bodies. But there's a slight dehumanization every time we say black bodies. And I think we were very conscious as well about, the use of language within the show to make sure that artists are framed in a way that makes sense or that is more democratic. Education and pedagogy has looked different in different times and eras.
I mean, if we take that particular work, I mean, it's one of the most joyful works in the exhibition that really brings this idea of a Black geography, Pan-Africanism, Pan-Blackness, and Afritude, if you want, into play. I am convinced that this is where the Black power lies, not in all these small countries that Berlin organized for us, not in the divisions that, racism has put in place for us. I believe in this possibility, and many people have believed in this possibility and continue to believe in this possibility of a unified yet very diverse space of Pan-Africanism.
When we see is deeply rooted in the history of the great emancipation movements of Black peoples all around the world, which have themselves been influenced by movements such as Black consciousness in South Africa, the Black Power movement in the United States, the Black art movement, negritude and Afropolitanism. The authors summoned by the curators invite us to rethink our universal history and to take a fresh look at the multiple forces that have shaped Africa and the world.
There were so many writers that we drew on as we were thinking and researching for When We See Us. Of course, Achille Mbembe's text on self-writing was an anchor. But you also have to think about, James Baldwin. You have to think about, there's so many, Nobese Philip. I think in essence, we had writers who talk about post-Blackness, Blackness within painting, and the complexities of Africaneity, and writers that reflect all of that. I think what When We See Us does is that it also tries to not flatten Blackness, hopefully show the complications about Blackness. I think if you think about the theoretical framing of the exhibition, it's almost like there's a chorus of different voices and ideas. And we hope that when people see the exhibition, it's not a homogenization of Blackness. The different words for Blackness mean different things at different times. So correct me if I'm wrong as a French speaker, but negra, métis, mestizos, those all evoke different things at different times. So it's there's a multiplicity, but there's also there's something universal about it that brings it together.
Another great thinker in this political jaw is, of course, Aimé Césaire, who created the concept of negritude, which designated the set of cultural characteristics and values of Black people claimed as their own, as well as their belonging to this race. The year was 1936, and the 23-year-old French poet and politician took the side of Black people's feeling to appropriate the bruising inflicted by history. Negritude is the simple recognition of the fact of being Black and the acceptance of this fact, of our destiny as Black people, of our history and our culture. But Aimé Césaire is not alone in this literary and political movement. Negritude brings together French-speaking Black writers to set Black identity and culture. Aimé Césaire, Léopold Sédar Senghor, Léo Gontran-Damas, Guy Tyrolien, Birago Diop et René Despestre were among them. French intellectuals such as Jean-Paul Sartre accompany them. This chorus of voices resonates with the massively collective dimension of When We See Us, which brings together subjectivities in harmony.
I think that my greatest joy on working from a decidedly African and Pan-African perspective is exactly the fact of constantly being exposed to the multiplicity and the variety of being Black in the world. It's not because being Black in Cuba is different than being Black in Brazil or different than being Black in Congo today that the experience of Blackness is not similar. That's the idea.
The curators brings us face to face with one of the exhibition's emblematic paintings, which in itself sums up their approach in this allegorical painting. The artist, Chéri Chérin, is paying homage to those that came before the Obamas and is celebrating the Black political leadership with former President and First Lady of the USA, Barack and Michelle Obama.
Basically, it's a celebration of the 2008 presidential win of Barack Obama and how that win of the election in 2008 signaled or kind of unleashed an incredible global joy of global Black subjectivity across the globe. This painting is an amalgamation or is an accumulation of historical, political moments, of social moments, of incredible, important figures. That's one of the things that I regret somehow in contemporary times is the very strong link that existed between the civil rights movement of the 1960s, the post-independent movements and liberation movements actually starting post-war, and the different liberation movements on the continent, where the civil rights movement was extremely inspirational and very close. So this is why you see, for instance, in the work some allegory, but also respect given to Dr. King, and of course Reverend Jesse Jackson. You also have Nelson Mandela, and the whole history of most recent Black experience of the last 20 years, so to speak.
And to experience this diversity of artistic movements in every space of the exhibition, this dialogue celebrating Blackness is felt through the music that irradiates each alcove with its notes. As Koyo Kuo explains,
it is a collaboration with musician, musicologist, sound artist, South African soundist Neo Muyenga, who's an incredible sound researcher and political theorist, basically, who compiled the different soundtracks and playlists that are across the exhibition. That's one. The other thing is also that I think music makes everything nicer, bearable, more beautiful. It's time that music comes back into exhibition space. It has always been very, very long. All the way to the 60s, it was not an oddity to have music accompanying an exhibition.
If you do listen to all the music in the different rooms, you see what I think about as a call and response between different areas and different times. How, for example, music from Congo may have influenced music in Brazil and vice versa, and how South African music during apartheid influenced something else. So it's again all pointing back to a Black experience which has multiplicity, dynamism, and complexity.
When We See Us is a triumphant and unprecedented celebration of African art in the diaspora, giving full meaning and force to Maya Angelou's poem, Still I Rise.
You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust, I'll rise.
For me, it's a poem of defiance. It's a poem of triumph.
Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? Just because I walk as if I have oil wells pumping in my living room. Just like moons and like suns with the certainty of tides, just like hope springing high, still I rise.
And a poem of liberation, a poem of agency. It's a call, actually, of liberation, and as a Black person, and particularly as a Black woman.
Did you want to see me broken? Bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries? Does my sassiness upset you? Don't take it so hard just because I laugh, as if I have gold mines digging in my own backyard. You can shoot me with your words, you can cut me with your lies, you can kill me with your hatefulness, but just like life, all right.
To go further, When We See Us is also a project that proposes an exciting timeline. At the end of the exhibition at Beaux-arts, you can see how Black expression in the last century has been underpinned by negritude, Pan-Africanism, civil rights, African liberation and independence, anti-apartheid, Black consciousness movement, Black Lives Matter and Afropolitanism. The timeline celebrates the many rich contributions to the canon of Black art history worldwide, from 1804, the year of Haiti's independence, to 2020, when researches from Dight's team for the exhibition was completed. The exceptional exhibition When We See Us is to see at Beaux-arts until August 2025. The podcast Dialogues and Subjectivities, an echo of the When We See Us exhibition, is a Beaux-arts native creation. Written, directed and produced by Safia Kessas with Bowery Street Creation. Sound engineer and direction, Quentin Bresson. Voiceover, Jodie. Translation, Cappart. Musics, Universal Production. This podcast was made possible thanks to the support and guidance of CEO and Artistic Director Christophe Slagmuylder, Zoe Gray, Director of Exhibitions, Evelyne Hinque, Head of Wide, Anne Judong and Maité Smeyers, both Curatorial Exhibitions Coordinators, and Head of Institutional Relations, Magdalena Liskova. This collaboration is realized within the National Recovery and Resilience Plan, launched by the Belgian federal government with the financial support provided in the framework of the Next Generation EU and its European Recovery and Resilience Facility.